Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Well, welcome to Derry Has Finished, and as I enjoyed quite a few parts of it more than I enjoyed the actual two recent It movies, I felt it was time to write the video essay I have been pondering for some time now, which is the psychological fear that goes on when we are watching clowns. So, for today's video, let's look at clowns and how they have become so scary, uncomfortable and distressing, and what makes them this way, and, more importantly, how the psychological cogs turn and grind when we get a clown on screen. Now, I don't need to do a lengthy intro, as we all know what clowns are and have seen them in the news, movies, cartoons, and for some of us, real life, so I will quickly climb the crow's nest and shout, "Spoilers ahoy!" before unveiling today's flow-through chart, which is History of a Clown, Paradox of a Clown, Tears of a Clown, Rebranding of a Clown. Now, be it the real-life serial killer John Wayne Gacy dressing as his creation Pogo the Clown, the notoriously horror pop culture icon that is Pennywise, the endlessly downbeat and nihilistic car crash that is Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons, or even those killer clowns from outer space from their own eponymous movie, clowns are ubiquitous and famously used in horror movies, specifically because of the connotations which are now reflex and automatic when clowns are being used to creep people out. Now, some people have a completely irrational response to clowns, which is a pathological response and a severe phobia called coulrophobia. Now, that's actually an official disorder, and like claustrophobia or arachnophobia, and even the very obscure phobia called anatidaephobia, which is the fear of being watched by a duck, of all things. I apologise if this picture is triggering you. Now, phobias are recognised as mental health disorders and affect people with crippling anxiety. Oops, sorry. And phobias stop you living life and can box people into avoidance, and they can even ruin lives when the sufferer cannot interact with the world as they would like to because of their condition. However, you don't need coulrophobia to genuinely feel creeped out by clowns, because they're just kind of wrong. There is just something unsettling and uncomfortable, and they give off odd vibes. But it wasn't always this way in terms of fearing clowns, as not only have they been around for hundreds of years, but they used to be adored and followed as entertainers and court jesters. So before we get to the darkness of modern horror, let's look at History of a Clown. Throughout history, clowns have held multifarious roles which are more than just simple entertainers, but since the late 19th century, they started to take on a more sinister role. In contemporary Western societies, clowns were usually depicted as friendly figures of fun and comedy and would be prevalent in circuses and children's parties. However, despite being used as entertainment throughout the centuries, the first documented clowns are from 4,000 years ago in Egyptian hieroglyphs, and then entertaining wealthy people in medieval times as jesters and figures of fun, things changed in the 1800s with people like England's Joseph Grimaldi, who defined the white-faced clown makeup, and then Philip Astley, who developed the typical circus clown. Now, according to Psychology Today, the development of the clown into an overtly malevolent figure began towards the end of the 19th century, perhaps most prominently in the 1892 opera Pagliacci, in which the central character Canio murders his wife and her lover whilst dressed as a clown. And from these depictions emerged the modern trope of killer clowns and scary clowns that we see on screen. Such sinister clowns are now abound in popular culture. Prominent examples include the possessed clown doll in the 1982 movie Poltergeist, and of course Batman's nemesis, the Joker. There's also killer clowns from outer space, Eli Roth's low-rent but grossly enjoyable horror film Clown, the nihilistic cruelty of Krusty the Clown, who happily sends kids to freeze half to death at Camp Krusty, and of course the modern day retelling of Pennywise the Dancing Clown from Stephen King's It. And over time, murderous manifestations of clowns in popular culture slowly begin to start dirtying and contaminating the images and thoughts of clowns in general, so we move a long way from the old style of clowns, which were jesters, into the very sinister and insidious and dark figures that we get on screen today. Now, coulrophobia is not listed in the DSM-5, but the largest and most recent survey to date, including 987 adult participants from 64 different countries, reported that 53.5%, 528 of the 987 of this sample survey, had some degree of fear over clowns. Now, that's not all because of Bill Skarsgård's gleeful portrayal of the child-eating monster. The study was carried out in 2022, by the way, but the clown has suffered a massive image problem which has long since moved it from being the childhood painted figure of fun into something more nefarious and insidious. So it's no real surprise that so many people in that survey said they just didn't like clowns, as these days clowns upset more people than they do entertain them. Now, of course, speaking of medieval clowns and things like that, times have moved on, and now kids have Bluey, Paw Patrol, iPads, phones, and a whole world to find something they like. Long gone are the days when kids merely had Muffin the Mule dancing on a piano for a short time back when TV was black and white. So, the predilection for wanting clowns and the innate cultural impact of clowns is always going to change. And staying in children's entertainment, clowns are being used less these days as they are seen by many as bygone and creepy entertainers, partly through the passage of time and also because of people like John Wayne Gacy, who dressed as Pogo the Clown whilst, in secret, was slaughtering and burying young men under his house. And the vile celebrity Jimmy Savile, who used to attend children's hospitals dressed in clown outfits only to use his entertainment act as a mechanism to sexually abuse young children. Overall, the image of a man dressed like a clown coming up to you with painted face or acting silly actually has more dark connotations than it does nice connotations. So times have moved on. Travelling circuses now have their own image problems, and clowns are carrying connotations through years of real-world and fictional portrayals of dark clowns in the media and on TV. And part of the reason for this massive image change, apart from obviously Pennywise eating kids in yellow raincoats, is that the seemingly pleasant circus clown can just as easily upset people as it is there to entertain. Clowns are incongruent figures who radiate unpredictability. For example, if they were coaxing a shy and embarrassed child to be part of a magic trick, the clown can quickly turn and humiliate someone with something like a jet of water from their flower, or do something that makes the child feel really uneasy. And in the bygone times, clowns were very much slapstick comedy that self-deprecated, and combine this with their current outlandish odd behaviour and the portrayals that we see in the media, and it's no wonder that they put people on edge more than they relax them. And, as we have discussed earlier, clowns have long held a more ambiguous and multifarious role than the simple entertainer. Derwin, 2004, and Bala, 2010, posit that clowns and similar incarnations such as the Fool, Jester or Joker embody the trickster archetype, a force that seeks to balance good and evil and can thus be either benevolent or malign, seemingly at a whim. So when we meet them, straight away, we don't know if the clown is coming with good intentions or bad intentions. Uncertainty thus exists as to the potential of a clown to do harm as well as charm. Welcome to Derry does this very well in the episode where we explore the real Pennywise the Clown. We see kids gathering round for a guffawing and slapstick routine of a clown trying to grab flowers and falling over a lot. Now, however, in the modern world, where we have heard real-life horror stories of strangers luring children away and the psychological viewpoint that an outlandish and weird stranger being silly in makeup is more likely to ring alarm bells than tickle funny bones, clowns were meant to be figures of fun, and in the old days they were, but throughout history showing us the real monsters behind the makeup and a general paranoia towards them, the modern world has the antiquated view of the clown and left it behind. Much like those really scary Victorian dolls kids used to play with. It's something from a time gone by with an image problem that now looks genuinely creepy, and in a world of digital entertainment and reverse image laundering through movies, clowns are purely something to fear rather than cherish. So clowns have evolved through history and become something kids have left behind, and with their makeup and unpredictable behaviour, they are now something to fear. And that's because now they are pigeonholed in the modern world as figures of sinister intentions rather than entertainers. We approach Paradox of a Clown. Our white face and makeup laced figures of fun are designed to appeal to children, but despite their appearance, they now have the opposite effect and have gone from icons of humour to dark omens who exude menace and terror. And for this next step, we need to get into the etiological theories of our dislike of clowns. Now, horror has a long history of taking the most safest things in the world, or things which we generally stereotype as benign and natural, into things which cause great terror and apprehension. Jaws ruined swimming for millions of people in the 1970s, pets have been turned into beasts like in the movie Cujo, and even cute little kids can be manipulated into vehicles of terror like in films such as The Omen. It's the brilliance of a good horror film. Find something ordinary and twist it so that every time you see it, it then evokes that scary scene or the music from something which is now embedded in your brain. And clowns have been no different, as throughout the decades they have been a reliable source of both disgust and unease. Theories of the overall etiology of a clown could be broadly split into three main categories: those relating to their physical appearance, those relating to their behaviour, and those derived from learning and or experience. Clowns and their behaviour are all derived from aspects of physical appearance, and the suggestion is that coulrophobia may stem from something called the uncanny valley effect, which describes the feelings of eeriness and repulsion triggered by near human-looking objects. The uncanny valley effect has been offered as an explanation for feelings of unease at other human-like artifacts such as dolls, masks, puppets, virtual reality avatars, and computer-generated characters in movies. And with regard to clowns, the distortion of their facial features through makeup gives them a near-human quality which may elicit the uncanny valley effect. And one suggestion in the popular psychology literature is that the fear of clowns stems from a difficulty in face processing and our subsequent inability to perceive the true emotions of the figure because of their makeup. This creates uncertainty as to the character's intentions. After all, the clown's painted smile may be concealing anger and aggression, and therefore the clown is a potential risk to our safety. Now, as I often say in my videos, we read facial expressions and make an assumption and a judgment in just 0.7 seconds. However, as clowns have a fixed smile, or they are smiling within the makeup of a fixed frown, which is overemphasized, their makeup becomes like a mask or a distorted version of a human expression which conceals their true emotions, and this links to the paradox as, despite being all smiley or clown-like in general, the cognitive confusion of their makeup seems to present insidious intentions, and the cognitive dissonance of these two contrasting states leaves us feeling undecided and uneasy. So, in summary, despite the clown being a figure of jest and fun, the paradox of unease based upon physical appearance of their makeup and their apparent joy is interpreted as something dark and insidious because their physical appearance is incongruent. The uncanny valley effect of being nearly human is present. Their exaggerated facial features convey a sense of threat. Their makeup disrupts the interpretation of emotional signals. Their behaviour is outlandish and somewhat aggressive. Their unpredictable behaviour causes discomfort. The fear stems from negative portrayals of clowns in the media. And finally, horror movies have slowly corrupted the once charming clown persona. And because of all of these factors and the modern world changing and constantly evolving and now having pop culture icons like Pennywise the Dancing Clown, we move into Tears of a Clown. Gone are the days where the happy clown was a figure of fun. Now they are almost universally evil, tragic, or corrupt representations of humanity. Like we said earlier, media portrayals of clowns like Stephen King's Pennywise have cemented the evil clown trope in horror, strongly influencing public perception. On a side note, I think this is why the modern Pennywise has no real impact for me, and that's nothing about Bill Skarsgård's gleeful malice when playing the role. As much like Robert Englund in the latter Elm Street movies, Skarsgård relishes every moment in the makeup and plays Pennywise with a near malicious charm that is beguiling. But for me, the modern Pennywise is designed to look too creepy, and I think that's my issue. In the original TV series, Tim Curry's clown was an odd-looking figure that was both comedic and horrific, and that imbalance and the dissonance I talked about earlier seemed to bother me more. However, like I said, that's a subjective take. However, long before Pennywise, be it the doll in Poltergeist, Bart Simpson's horrific bed in that Simpsons flashback episode, and the killer clowns from outer space, there have been plenty of clowns in pop culture that are pure evil, and by twisting their already exaggerated features, what's frightening about them when they work is that the fact that they seem to charm their way to do evil. For example, perhaps my favourite scene from the entire It movies is of course the opening yellow raincoat scene with young Georgie and Pennywise's charm and come closer and, oh, it's lonely down here, oh, come closer, only to turn into something horrific and bite his arm off. Now, the killer clowns from outer space were intentionally evil and bulbous like spitting image puppets, so they looked grotesque overall. However, for Pennywise, he's meant to be a dancing clown, which is hiding its evil, so kids like Georgie come closer. So you can make the clown exaggerated and over the top and scary, or you can rein it back a little bit and make something a little bit more benign, or go for creepy and odd, and I wouldn't go near that, but in the context of the film we can see it. Either way, the clown is now marked as evil or tragically corrupt. Even Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons has a dual personality. He entertains the kids with custard pies and jokes before the camera. Then, once the camera's off, he's smoking heavily, gambling, getting in with the mob, living like a deadbeat, and failing in life once the cameras stop rolling. Clowns are now outsiders, figures on the fringes of a society and keepers of life's absurdity. Even in the 20th century, the two greatest clowns, Otto Griebling and Emmett Kelly, were economic outcasts and hobos. Then, in the industrial age of the big top circus, clowns had somewhat of a revival into the mainstream. However, today's clowns are not something wholesome and for the family. And the point at which clowns transitioned from figures associated with laughter and play into fear and horror took an irrevocable step forward with the figure of Pennywise the Dancing Clown in the aforementioned Stephen King's It. In the book, Stephen King's Pennywise connected the growing obsolescence of clowns into terror by a manner of suggesting Pennywise's murderous psychosis is driven by fear and how the clown likes to scare people because when they're scared, they taste much nicer. But clowns now mirror the industrial age from when they were so popular, and that's why horror has disused fairgrounds and abandoned circuses that often serve as backdrops to crime or horror narratives. In other words, the rusting infrastructure of old-fashioned fun is a representation of what the clown itself is. And, to mention The Simpsons again, it also comes into the sad and fading career of Krusty the Clown, as he's always perpetually bankrupt and depressed behind the makeup and smile. So clowns can threaten us because we no longer have a use for them, and they are disregarded. They are unwanted cast-offs, the remnants of an age we have outgrown, and banished exiles who reappear occasionally to glare at us with anger. Even the Ross Noble horror comedy Stitches was about a deadbeat clown who is hired for a party but ridiculed and tormented by the kids and then accidentally killed. Stitches is a joke from the minute he walks into the party, and not a funny one. He is the butt of all jokes and someone to laugh at for the wrong reasons, and his tears, in terms of rejection and being an outcast, is replaced eventually by menace and vengeance as he hunts down and kills his abusers as they get older. And as times have moved on, circuses rot because kids have far more advanced mechanisms of entertainment. There are also animal cruelty issues which blighted the circus stereotype, and, like the circus themselves, the clowns are now decaying in the carnival yards which once housed them. We come to rebranding of a clown. Taking all of the above into account, clowns now have a new lease of life as figures of malevolence, violence, and horrifying cruelty. The clown, with its painted-on expression of happiness and humour, limits the range of feelings we're supposed to feel and creates the dissonance I talked about earlier as connotations and a sense of unease at their intentions creeps in. The clown insists that we laugh, and what's great for horror is that we don't want to laugh. And this is why the situation becomes, at best, awkward and, at worst, combined with the unsettling, colourful familiarity, terrifying. Their makeup now reminds us of death, infection, or blood and injury, and thus evokes disgust and an avoidance response. Even in Todd Phillips' Joker, Joaquin Phoenix is afflicted with a condition that causes uncontrollable laughter, but his life is truly hideous. Pennywise eats kids and terrorises Derry with gleeful abandon, and in Eli Roth's Clown, a harmless clown uniform for a children's party turns a deadbeat dad into a child-eating monster who ends up going to a soft play area and massacring several innocent children. The clown is completely now rebranded, no longer a figure of fun, but something evil, dangerous, and a creature that would sooner kill your child than make them a balloon animal. We have gone full circle, and the jesters from olden times are now demons, cannibals, and entities of evil. Clown makeup accentuates features which elicit negative emotional responses and causes dissonance. And this causes disgust and not joy because of the media, real-life stories, and also rebranding through horror movies. Disgust is also experienced more generally in response to items or situations that remind an individual of death, and clowns are now firmly connotated with death everywhere. Clowns now trigger contrasting parts of the brain, the amygdala for fear, the hippocampus and neocortex for memory, as we all have what is a clown stored inside our representations of the world, and, when mixed with horror, they affect the limbic system in terms of fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and also the anterior cingulate gyrus in terms of making solid judgments, as we look at them and get the incongruence of a happy face but malicious intent, and thus it causes us to go on edge. Happy makeup, but dark intentions. Playful clothes, but a murderous desire. And clowns even engage and disrupt our prefrontal cortex as empathy and intuition all light up when we see a dancing clown and we just know something isn't right. So, clowns are evil. Their look isn't necessarily a stereotype of evil, and it's based upon a childhood born from non-threatening motives, but we know that clowns have been rebranded into horror creatures which are just menacing and terrifying. In other words, although they're designed to be funny, we kind of know that they're evil. And that cognitive dissonance grates deeply, and our fears over clowns become greatly increased. Like their makeup, which is fixed but hiding possible malice, there's just too much wrong with them overall. Nothing sits right about them, and in the end, we just genuinely feel uncomfortable. And that's what makes them so great in horror movies. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. So remember that psychology is cool.
So cool.
Please like, share and subscribe, as more subs means more vids, and even leave a comment or start a discussion, as healthy debate is always welcome on here. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.